Good morning, and thank you for joining me live today, where I'm going to be talking to hairdresser Michael Van Clarke. Now, you may or may not know, and I'm just looking for him, so forgive me if I keep looking down, that I worked in the hairdressing industry for a thing or two about hair, but we'll see how Michael has.
Hello, Linda.
Oh, hello. Hi. I'm so excited
I'm
to
very
talk to
pleased
you.
to be here.
So, one thing I know I talk to a lot with your PR is that back in the day, I haven't done it for about 5 years now, I used to judge the British Hairdressing Business Awards. And I was always so impressed with your team's work. And it wasn't just obviously about you. I remember doing one for receptionist and one for salon team. And it was the detail that really impressed me. And I understand that you are a huge detailer.
Yes, I think detail counts for a lot, especially if we're working at a high level of excellence and quality in everything that we do.
So back in the day, this is just for my own information, where did you originally train?
With John Frieda, just shortly after he left Leonard's.
John Frieda, yeah.
And he set up with the manager of Leonard's, Clifford Stafford, and he had a tiny salon off Marylebone High Street. I think for him, having come from a 5 or 6 story Grosvenor Square townhouse into what really was a very small salon, it was a huge change for him. But I started there in 78, not long after I finished school. I finished in the summer, expected to have a couple of months off, and got the call from John to come about 2 days after finishing school. So,
well, hairdressing royalty started with.
I think it was a great opportunity to start at a level where you're working with the best in the industry, the best photographers, all the most incredible clients, from rock stars to royalty. And it was a rock and roll era back in the 70s, possibly less professional than now, but in some ways perhaps maybe a little bit lighter hearted, more fun.
Yes. So
I worked with
John
for 10 years. Had a great time with him, but the time came when it was right for me to move on. In some ways, he'd moved on himself. He'd moved on to America and was much more involved in products. So at that time, his presence wasn't really around the salon anymore. And that changed everything for us. And so I opened my own salon in 88 in Marylebone, an area I was familiar with, even though by then I'd been working at his Mayfair salon. By then he had a salon in Mayfair, Alford Street and the Ritz Hotel. And so I went back to Marylebone, which was an area which was cheap at the time. Not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore.
It was a forgotten little enclave in the centre of London, surrounded by very nice areas. We were 5 minutes walk to Mayfair. We were 3 minutes to Regent's Park. You could actually get anywhere from Mayfair, and yet it was this unloved area that had had its heyday in the 60s and 70s with all the BBC stars, and then it had sort of lain forgotten when the crisis of the late 80s hit. So really throughout the late 80s and 90s, it wasn't an area that anyone wanted to be in, really. Most of them, a quarter of the shops in the high street were either charity shops or closed. They tried to recover.
Yes, I can remember when it was like. So, how did you go from having, you know, opening your salon to becoming a salon that's recognised as somewhere A-listers like
well,
to
I think
go?
it's really putting one step in front of the other every day, relentlessly aiming to make things better in every aspect, and looking very deeply at ourselves and what it is we do and what it is our clients like. And I've always been much more of a client hairdresser than an industry hairdresser, although I think through our success we've become more recognised in the industry. But it's always been very, very client focused. And I think that's why I have clients. We have, I think, still over 100 clients that have been with us for more than 40 years. And it's a very strong
Wow, that's
clientele.
amazing.
But it really is about looking at everything we do all the time and trying to improve it.
So if anyone's joined us now and is thinking, I'd love to go to Michael Van Clarke, but I'm not an A-lister, do you have a lot of ordinary people as well?
Most of our clients are, you know, they are discerning
Right.
people, but they come from all walks of life. You know, for some people, they will save up to come to the salon. For others, it's not an issue at all. But what I would say is, because we're not on a high street. I've never worked on a high street. You know, people sort of have to know us to come to us, and I think that affects the type of clientele we acquire. And it's always been my passion to give our best to clients. And always when I see a new client, my thinking is that that should be a client for life. You know, we should be able to do whatever necessary to make sure that client doesn't need to go anywhere else. And I think that philosophy drives the level of service that we give, where clients come, they feel very welcome, they feel special, they feel looked after, and that we deliver the goods when it comes to our technical skills.
So there's an awful lot of talk going on at the moment about sort of pro-aging and how women of a certain age, and really I'm talking from 40 onwards, feel that they're not represented in photography and in the media and in advertising. As you know, I'm sure, I worked with another quite well-known hairdresser for many years as his PR. So, and I've written these words many times, that a haircut can be adapted to anybody, whatever their hair is like and whatever age they are. And therefore I'm not quite so horrified when I see a picture of a sort of 18-year-old with a haircut. I can quite happily relate to it, but I know most people can't.
Well,
What's your stance on that?
The other old wives' tale is that when you get to 40, you have to have short hair. There's another one I think is nonsense. It came about in an era where we didn't have the skill with colour, with cut, with styling, and past 40, most women's hair would start to become frizzy and white, and so to wear that long wasn't attractive. But nowadays we have the ability to do all sorts of things with hair, so hair becomes an accessory, like a scarf, like a top. So, you know, we can work hair to suit. No, I wouldn't suggest someone of 75 wears their hair down to their waist or their knees, but we have a lot of people wearing their hair long that may have had their hair long in the 70s when they were in their teens, and actually like the idea of long hair. And if the hair is a good quality and it's well cut, well looked after, well conditioned, why not?
Well, certainly speaking for myself, I mean, this time last year my hair was down here. I seem to go, actually I rarely go much shorter than this, but I seem to go up and down, and I guess my most normal haircut has been on my
Nice
shoulders. I still desire that
well,
70s
it's coming
shaggy
back in
look.
a big way at the moment, because you know we've gone through 20 or 30 years of hairdressers frankly getting a little bit lazy about cutting hair, and they've relied too much on the bob, and that bob has become the line for every haircut, whether it's long or short, and without proper layering. And most hairdressers, because it's gone on so long and hair tools and tongs have disguised the fact that the hair shapes are pretty much all the same, a lot of hairdressers have never learned to layer properly. And so for many
Yeah.
people now that want to have these layered styles, they're struggling to find hairdressers that can do that.
I am a nightmare client. I go through this stage. Well, I can draw the sectioning patterns for you, and I go, do you know how to do this? And it's my friend's daughter who's been cutting my hair, and she is terrified of me. So obviously you
Yeah,
have your own brand, and I, again, the hairdresser I work with always used to say, when he couldn't find the products he needed to create the hairstyles that he wanted to
yes.
create, he had to make his own products. And I suspect that is
It's
very similar
well, it's
for
certainly
you.
how it started. It actually started with a partner of mine having thinning hair problems, and we sought out a trichologist in Mayfair, who was highly esteemed, and we used his products, and actually her hair recovered, and we were so impressed that we had him make a range for us. And he didn't normally make for hairdressers, he only made for trichologists, but he seemed to take pity on us and made a small range of products. This is about 35 years ago. And the key product, which works for everyone's hair, called Lifesaver, is a pre-wash treatment. And we use that as a backwash product, back bar, for about 15 years before we launched it publicly. And now that's sold
Okay.
worldwide and gets thousands of 5-star reviews. That's an essential product. But from that, we have, over the last 10 years, maybe 15 years now, developed a range of products that's now over, I think, over 60 products and equipment that satisfies what we want to use in the salon. And that's the essence for every product. If we feel that we can create something better than what's available in the market, whether that's a better mousse, a better thickening spray, a better type of shampoo, then we will launch it, we will release it. And if we don't feel we can, we won't. Because there's no point our stylists thinking that they'd like to have someone else's kit in their bag. It doesn't support our brand that way.
So do you test your products before you
Personally,
launch them
yes,
in the
and they
salon?
take so long. Everything is tested personally. We work with about 4 labs, and on average, each product takes about 3 years from conception to actually being available on the shelf. Our latest product that comes out in about 2 weeks' time is a heat protecting blow dry balm. You think, well, there's loads of those around.
Okay.
What's so special? But this one took us longer than any other product because we wanted to be a real multitasking product that was heat protecting, eliminated frizz without making hair poker straight. So it actually kept wave and curl, it kept shine, it hydrated the hair, it had UV protection. You know, all these things had to go into this one product, which would then be easy to use. Well, that ended up at version 16, and we've never made a product where we've had to go through that many versions from the lab before signing it off. Nearly 5 years with COVID interfering as well, but it's a product.
So, you know, a lot of people buy their hair products from the supermarket or even supermarket owned brands. And again, I've had the luxury of working with another hair product company, so I do know the work that goes in, obviously not for yours. But why should people invest money in their hair products? Because I think a lot of people don't
I
understand
think
why they should.
it's common to think that, and I think it's common to think it because probably 98% of hair products are all very similar. The ones that are different do tend to be more expensive, and I know that from having to formulate. Once you want to use certain ingredients that have an amazing effect, they're very, very expensive. So to give you an idea, this blow dry product that we have coming out, 2 of the ingredients that we're using are £500 a litre. Now,
Oh my
luckily,
goodness.
we don't use very much, but for most
Yeah.
multinationals, they wouldn't even consider that because they're starting. They have to start with the economics of the product before the lab even begins to make something. You know, we always start with make what I want. I want it to be the best it can be. We'll talk about cost after. Whereas for most multinationals that are on very tight, economic restrictions, they will say this mustn't cost more than 30 pence in the bottle because we have to sell it for £5-6.
Right.
So that's your budget. You have to be able to make it for 30p. Now, inevitably, that excludes an awful lot of things that could go into products. So they tend to use more of the similar things like silicons, plasticizers that give an effect to hair, but are not necessarily doing the hair any good. They're more cosmetic. And that's a big difference.
Yeah. Yes. Um, okay. So a lot of my followers are kind of perimenopausal or menopausal or postmenopausal, and that group of women seem to have a lot of problems with their hair. But also in that group, and I guess particularly since they've gone through lockdown, a lot of people are letting their hair go natural. And that has its own issues. I mean, my hair is my natural colour, and I used to be very ginger. And I started colouring my hair, I guess, in my mid-40s, and obviously had the luxury that I could have it done when I wanted. And it wasn't until lockdown that I realised that I thought I was 100% white, but it actually looked blonde. So I've been very lucky, I guess. But there's this group that had dark hair or mousy hair that call themselves Silver Sisters, and it's obviously a very they call themselves transitioning, as if it's quite a depressing or frightening thing to do. So I'd like to talk about how to look after kind of grey hair. But the one thing that I've noticed, particularly now I've got more layers in my hair, is that I haven't got the texture. Now that I don't have colour, my hair's lost its texture. It's much softer. And I've realised that I've got to change the product, plus it's shorter. When it was long, it was easy. But I need to change the products I use in order to give it texture. And I guess a lot of older people think they've lost texture because they've stopped colouring it. That's a bit of a roundabout question.
But there's the other side of the coin where people colouring their hair less have softer hair, that they want softer hair. So I get it with your style, especially when it's shorter. You want the hair to do stuff, and it needs some texture to do that. But as you rightly say, you can replace that with product. You know, there are many products, like we have thickening sprays. You know, this is one product, this Thicker Quicker, which instantly turns soft, floppy hair into hair that you can mold and make much more voluminous. There are various products and styling techniques on top of the right haircut as well that will give body to the hair. So all these things change. But something I find with clients that are thinking about going from coloured hair to not colouring their hair is that it is very black and white. You know, either you do 100% colour or you don't colour. But there's this whole world in between, this world of nuance and subtlety, where you can colour less hair. And this is something we certainly achieved more easily after lockdowns, where if we'd been persuading clients to tolerate some level of white hair, it changes the whole approach to colouring. If a client says, I do not want to see one white hair on my head, well, that's a certain type of colouring. There's a range of things you can do. If they say, well, do you know what? If in some lights you see the odd white, then there's this much greater range of techniques and colours you can use. And that's what we found after lockdown. Because people have been forced to look at their white hair, they were much more accepting of more subtle, natural methods of keeping some white, eliminating some white, but giving generally much more natural effects to the colour.
So can you kind of elaborate on that? What sort of
instead
techniques?
of you know, I don't see it with clients of our own, but with new clients that will come in. You know, like I had a new client this morning. Far too much colour going on the hair, and colour on top of colour. You know, where the technicians are not being careful with how much colour they lay on. So, you know, she was a dark-haired lady, but where they've been colouring, the hair's grabbing black. And then they're colouring over the top to try and compensate to not have so much black. They're putting some lights in, but then the lights are turning to ash. So instead of being warm golden blonde, they're going towards khaki at the ends. So you've got sort of heavy black roots beyond her natural black, and sort of khaki, over dried, just over coloured a bit. She knew it wasn't right, but she didn't know what she should be doing. So, well, but as I said,
expensive job to correct.
This is something that's actually better not to try and undo overnight, because it's just even more. If you can tolerate it for 2 or 3 months, do nothing, let it fade a bit, and then let's work on the virgin hair. But in her case, her base colour was lovely. All it needed was to keep more of her base colour and colour maybe 30% of the hair, instead of trying to colour 100% and then uncolour 40% of it. It's just madness.
I think the other problem as people age is that their skin tones change as well. So if you try and have the colour hair you had when you were 20, when you're 60, it's going to be unflattering instead of flattering. It often will make you look older instead of younger.
It can look unnatural. You know, certainly if someone had black hair when they were young and then they had boot polish black when they're 75 years old, it's a bit odd about that. But in terms of when the hair starts to turn white, what a lot of people don't appreciate is that it's not just the hair that's losing its colour, so becoming white. The base colour that isn't becoming white is losing tone. So it's actually moving, for most people, towards a shade of charcoal. So you may have had wonderful auburn hair when you were younger. It will get flatter as you get older. Some will turn white, and that flatness will end up becoming without any vibrancy or tone. So, and that's the salt and pepper effect. So in that case, it's not just about perhaps taking out some of the white, but it's also putting tone back in. You know, putting back the base colour.
Totally.
And that can create a much more flattering effect than no colour whatsoever. Because as you say, the white hair, it does drain colour from the face. You know, when the hair is flat in terms of tone.
I think also people have to colour their brows, if either with with a dye or with a pencil or eyeshadow or something, because I think if your hair has gone white and you ignore your brows, you can look incredibly flat.
I think the brows count for a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a great advocate that having a decent haircut, a beautiful haircut, and looking after your eyebrows
I would agree. I think for people that have experienced a great haircut, then you understand that it makes such a difference, because it's not only how good it looks, it's so easy. It's far better for you to make it look good as well, because it naturally wants to fall into place.
So when we talk about hair products, I know a lot of people will obviously use a shampoo and conditioner. You've already talked about pre-treatment and then maybe a leave-in conditioner. For the average, say, mid-length, long layered haircut, what product should you use? Because I've always had a bunch of products, and people have always over the years commented, oh, your hair looks good, oh, you can change your looks. And I would say, but I use 4 or 5 products, and I usually end up with some sort of shine spray. And I think either and really, I think a lot of hairdressers don't talk to their clients
I think
enough
that's
about
true.
what they're doing.
I do think that's true, and I think it's a shame, and it's something that we're always trying to educate, with our apprentices and all of our team, that you have to look after that client for when she's not with you as well, or
Yeah.
How they look after their at home. They don't have your skills. They've at least got to have the right technique and the right products to use.
I mean, so, I don't think I've ever been for anything like a facial where the beautician hasn't said at the end, and I've used this and this and this on you. But, hairdressers, when I've watched them,
A
don't
lot of them are
necessarily do
afraid.
that at all.
They feel they don't want to come across as salespeople. They have this thing. A lot of hairdressers have this thing that I'm creative,
Yeah.
and I'm an artist, so I'm not
artist,
selling anything. But really getting to understand that if you don't advise your client on what they need to achieve the look, then you're really failing them in some way. And it's not about selling. You're not pushing anything. You're giving them the choice. It's the free choice. But you have a duty to let them know what you recommend that they should use.
And I think well, I was going to say women, but most people
Yes.
are dying for that knowledge, want that.
Absolutely.
Improve after their hair. I mean, it's the most frustrating thing. If you go to the hairdressers, you come out, your hair looks fabulous, and then you can't recreate it yourself.
But it also doesn't mean to say that you have to have endless amounts of products. We do have a large range of products, but that's not every product for every client. We have the products that allow us to look after a full range of clients, but there are certain products that are for everyone. And the key one is the pre-wash treatment, because everyone's hair, as it grows out of their scalp, is at its healthiest. It's at its most full. And if you were to feel your hair at the root, you will feel the suppleness, there's the shine, there's the flexibility. It's a much thicker hair shaft at the root. Hair goes through life, and depending what you're doing to your hair, that hair will start to shrink down. So that's sunlight, heat styling, colouring, poor quality products will all cause dehydration moments to the hair. And what happens is, within the hair shaft, you have protein and water. You have a dehydration moment, the protein structure is less stable, bits of it break away. And so there's a gradual thinning of the hair over time. So whatever length you have, you really want to try and retain as much of your own hair as possible. It's not about putting plastic sheets or silicone wraps on the hair. It's about hanging on to what you have. And that's a long-term thing. It's a lifestyle thing, but it's the best thing of all, because if you can keep what you have for longer as it grows, it's transformational. So that's absolutely everyone. And that affects the color, the condition, how you style your hair, how it looks, how often it needs cutting. It changes everything when you keep the condition of the hair. And that's what the pre-wash does.
So a lot of women, sorry to interrupt you, a lot of women in their sort of late 40s, 50s say their hair is thinning, whether it is, and I believe that some it isn't really thinning, but they think it is, from conversations I've had. But if it truly is thinning when you become menopausal, have you got any suggestions of what people can do?
It will be thinning. There's a timeline of long shifts in hair changing. From the age of 18, you're 18 to 20, you're at your maximum, and sadly it is downhill all the way from there. You will not have the same hair at 80 that you have at 18, and it doesn't happen in a straight line. So that decline is in peaks and troughs. One of those troughs is menopause, and you will lose, most women, pregnancy is another one, you will lose hair during that time. So what you need to do is to make the most of what you have, do the best to minimize hair loss, which there are things you can do, but often it's also maybe looking at how your hair is cut, because how your hair is cut when you're 22 may not necessarily be the best way for when you're 52 in terms of maximizing. No, you go.
Sorry, but you said minimizing the loss. So what can you do to minimize the loss? What would you suggest? Is it diet? Is it the sort of brush you use?
If you're using aggressive styling techniques on hair that's been over processed with color too many times, that hair is going to be very fragile. You're going to create much more breakage than if you have a better regime. You know, if your hair's cut well, you might find that you can air dry your hair more often, you know, to not do so much to it. It may be that you've had an A-line overlong bob, which now the hair's thinning, it doesn't quite work, and it might work better to graduate the front of the hair to thicken up the hair around the face, which that on its own can transform how someone sees their hair, and it can make it look twice as thick straight away. You know, little things like this. It's not necessarily one thing, but if we take an approach from all different angles that will all have an effect, you know, the treatment, the haircut, how it's coloured. So many people have their hair unnecessarily over-coloured, which is so damaging to the quality of the hair, leads to so much more thinning hair and breakage, and yet they don't necessarily get a better effect. And also they end up having to have their hair coloured much more often because it's done in a way that grows out too quickly, or it's unstable, the colour, so it changes in the sun, and then they have to keep having things done. You know, there are lots of things to approach to make people's hair easier for them.
So someone messaged me and said that their hair is flat and heavy and static, particularly in the crown area, and they're wondering if something like product build-up can cause that.
When they say static, do you think they mean electric or flat, not moving?
I think they mean flat, not moving.
That could be down to the haircut. You know, if they've got longer hair that's been cut in just an A-line bob, and the hair started to get some body at the root, at the ends, if they've got older, more texture. You know, what worked when they were 20, silky, swingy, flat hair, as the hair gets a little bit wirier and fills out, that can actually look a bit odd, so full at the bottom and making it very flat here. So you get a pyramid effect.
Right. Yeah.
And that's from the front as well as from the back. And that's often a signal to actually relook at the hair shape. You know, the hair shape no longer works because the texture has changed. So
really, I'm getting from everything you're saying that the haircut is absolutely key as you told us.
Everything.
Yeah. And someone else was saying that they feel their hair is healthy at their roots. You've probably answered this already, but is very split and thinning at the ends. That also shows me,
because when people come in and say, my hair's thin, I can't do anything, my hair's thin, 95% of the time I will take my hand and grab a ponytail at the root and say, your hair's not thin, you've got thick hair, you've got fantastic hair, it's not being looked after. You know, within the space of a year of growth, it's become dry, split, brittle. That's not your hair. Your hair is what comes out at the root. You know, we have to change the way you're looking after your hair.
And going back to people that want to stop colouring their hair, I mean, I see quite a lot of women here on Instagram who have got quite long hair, and they're sort of, you know, saying, I want to stop colouring it, or I have stopped colouring it, and they'll put this 20 days, 80 days, whatever. In my head, I'm thinking, why don't you get your hair cut shorter and get rid of that colour? But I can see there's a big quandary there with some people. They want to keep their hair longer, but they don't want to colour it. What what is your advice to
Well,
someone who's in that?
it's
I'm fortunate
totally
it didn't
individual to look at, what is the colour they have, what is the shape that their hair is forming because of the way the haircut is, the texture. Invariably the haircut will improve it dramatically, invariably, and then assess, is that colour really flattering you? Could we adjust it a little in a way that you're not tied to coming and having colour every month, but you do it in a way that, 3 or 4 times a year you may have a top up. You're not going to colour all of your hair, but we're going to enhance parts of it. Keep parts, enhance parts. Colour is really important, and it needs someone to look at hair individually and have a strategy that makes it look as fantastic as it could be, with as little effort as possible and as little repeat colouring. And all of that should be part of designing someone's colour.
So, if someone wants to dramatically change their hair, what would your advice be? Should they go and have a consultation and then make an appointment, or should they just make an appointment? What would you advise to someone who wants to change their look completely?
Collect pictures or on Instagram, and the important thing is to communicate as clearly as possible the sorts of things you like. Now, it's not to say you go into someone and say, I must look like this superstar, because that's not realistic.
Yeah.
Hair's different, faces are different. A haircut should be adapted. It may have the feeling of the look someone presents, but it's adapted to look best for them. But I would say communication is everything. Depends how much you trust the hairdresser. I would probably want to be sure that they understand what I want first. So I would say book a consultation.
Mm-hmm. And is that free? Or do
I
people
think
have
it
to pay for a
differs in
consultation?
different salons. In our salon, the senior people do charge, and the younger stylists don't. I think at the end of the day, you want to have that time to really feel confident that you're understood and that the hairdresser also understands what they're going to be doing.
Okay, so I understand that once a week you go to Covent Garden first thing in the morning to get flowers for your salon, and that you're a bit of a control freak. So how much time do you actually spend
more than
with
people
clients?
would expect, actually, 45 years down the line, because it's probably the easiest thing and the thing I most enjoy. It's like my social. It's like where some people will work all day at the office and then go to the pub to relax. I run 3 companies. I will go and see clients to relax. And that's probably the difference. It's a very social experience. Many of the clients I've known for a long time, but I also see a lot of new clients. I had a client this morning that flew in from America, and it's lovely to see new clients as well. I enjoy that aspect. So I do actually now give Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, probably till about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 days a week.
This new client fly into America from America?
She was having other things done as well, but she did say she will fly back to actually have the colour done and have it recut in a couple of months. We have a lot of clients actually. Probably about 20% of my own clients live abroad, but they come through London often enough that they don't have to go to anyone else to have their hair cut. And we have 2 or 3 clients in Australia that travel through often enough. A lot of clients in the Middle East and Europe, and quite a few in America as well.
Right, well, I am going to stop because I've got builders outside and they've just had a break and they are starting to make noise. I'm having my roof done, which is all very stressful. It's been a real joy talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. And if anyone's watching and they have questions they'd like to ask Michael that we haven't answered, just comment or send me a direct message and I will pass them on.
Thank you.
So thank you for your time. I know you're very busy.
Bye. Bye.
Lovely talking to you. Bye.